Greetings to all C3RF members and friends across Canada, indeed around the world, and welcome to another In Hot session that aims, in this particular case, to home in on the continuing reverberations generated by Freedom Convoy 2022. And not to mention, in the very least, the follow-on invocation of martial law through the Emergencies Act that followed on the heels of the demonstration. Today, we have a very able wingman on board to discuss the issues raised in the form of military veteran Eddie Cornell, who was there throughout and is now a named applicant in a civil legal suit against the government of Canada. Things are about to get really, really hot. Now, before we do that, though, I'd like to spend a minute or so and thank our sponsor for this In Hot session, and that would be Act for Canada. And Act for Canada stands on guard to defend Canada and the Canadian people against all enemies, foreign and domestic, who through stealth or outright aggression seek to undermine the freedoms, economy, prosperity, and traditional values and heritage of the Canadian nation. And we know that there are quite a few of those. As far as the national director for Act for Canada, I'd like to give a special thanks to Valerie Price. And I just got a picture here of Valerie Price. Valerie Price is the Act for Canada National Director. She's devoted to free speech, and I can attest to that. She's also an inductee to the Knights of Malta in 2015. She's an honoree at Act for America conference in 2017, and a recipient of the Elizabeth Sabadish Wolf Profiles in Courage Award. She is quite the lady, and we thank her very, very much for her making this In Hot session possible. Now, before we begin, perhaps I'll give a brief introduction to our guest, Eddie Cornell. And by way of introduction, Eddie has served with 22 years in the Canadian Armed Forces as a gunner in the artillery branch of the combat arms. He served in several places within Canada and Europe, and also had a tour of duty where he was with the Canadian contingent in Cyprus. It was there that he became the recipient of the Medal of Bravery. He has worn several hats in his life since leaving the military, having worked in the auto industry and also as an auxiliary police officer with the Ontario Provincial Police. He participated in the trucker convoy and had a great opportunity to work alongside many great Canadians, assisting the truckers who were there standing for our rights and freedoms. As a result of what happened in Ottawa, he co-founded Veterans for Freedom, an organization that supports veterans and members of the public from the overreach of government. He is committed to continuing the fight for the rights and freedoms of Canadians that have been trampled on by our government, law enforcement, and the courts and judicial system in this country. His job will not be done until all of these rights are restored. So with that, Eddie, I'd like to give you a very special welcome to In Hot. It's great to have another veteran on board to discuss the issues of the day, particularly these issues, which are so critical to Canadian civil liberties. Now, I want to kick this off by asking you, Freedom Convoy 2022. What motivated you to venture into the crowd for that particular protest?
Well, thanks for the introduction, Russ. I guess leading up to the convoy, I've been pretty active speaking out against what was going on. Things just didn't really add up. And what I found is that, at different rallies and so on, it was the same 2,000, 3,000, maybe 5,000, at sometimes 10,000 people showing up at the same group showing up at rallies. So we weren't really getting the message out in the way that we'd hoped. And it was very frustrating. So I'd heard about the trucker convoy and I thought, I need to be there. And I got my car and away I went. I live in New Brunswick in a town called Shediac Cape, and it's about 1,500 kilometers. It was, a snowy January, and I drove all the way, not knowing what to expect. I joined in with the convoy from the east. And as you see here, I have my medals on today. I put my medals on, and on that Saturday morning, was walking amongst the people, and they noticed me, and I was asked to come up and speak on stage, which I did. And then I was taken in behind the scenes to work with the leadership and providing logistical support, whatever I needed to do to just help them. And the truckers came from across the country. I really believe that if the truckers hadn't done this, we'd be in a really dark place right now in this country. I think they changed the direction of this country drastically, and I was proud to be a part of it and supporting them.
Wow, that's it's interesting to note. You twig my mind there on saying that they changed the country drastically. I can't imagine what we would be like now, what Canada would be like now if there was no Freedom Convoy 2022. I mean, there would be we probably still have these mandates in place. You wouldn't see all the follow-on demonstrations around the world, places like New Zealand and Europe, and farmers now standing up. I think Freedom Convoy 2022 kicked it all off. But before I get into anything else, I want to point out to your medal there. The medal that is closest to your tie, I see, is a Medal of Bravery. And
Yes.
those are very, very few and far between. How did you get that medal?
Well, in Cyprus, I actually rescued one of the people that was drowning at sea, and I'm not a very strong swimmer myself, and
Wow.
I was successful. I was able to bring him in, and we both walked away. So it was just another day, and I went back to work, and I had no idea. And they decided that it was worthy of giving me this medal. So
Well,
it's I guess it's just you just do your job. I just didn't really think about it, and I was very proud to get the award, and I wear it
yeah.
proudly.
No, it's very, very well deserved. Something like that. I didn't realize that you weren't a great swimmer. I thought doing something like that you would be kind of a lifeguard type guy. But I know that could be a very dangerous situation, going after a person who's going down for the count himself. That was must have
And
been
the
very
sea was
dicey.
pretty rough. The sea was rough that day. I
Okay.
actually thought I wasn't going to make it at one point.
Yes.
The sky was gray, the water was gray, the bottom was gray, and I lost direction. I didn't know which way was up. And luckily enough, for whatever reason, somehow I ended up poking up out of the water, and there was the guy right in front of me. So off I went. I grabbed him, and in we went.
Yeah, it sounds like he was about to save you.
It could have very well worked out that way if things had been slightly different. Yeah.
Well, excellent. Well, excellent work on that. And like I say, Medal of Bravery is very, very few and far between, and that's a really a proud distinction. But back to Freedom Convoy 2022. How was the initially? What we saw on TV was two different stories. Like when I was watching it, I saw bouncy castles. I saw people handing out food, sweeping up streets, dancing, basically celebrating Canada. And I'd look in the papers, and I'd see that you guys were Russian assets. You're white nationalists. You flew Nazi flags, Confederate flags. And you wanted to overturn the government of Canada. So how did you see it on the ground?
Yeah, it was complete opposite. Basically what it was is children, parents, and grandparents showed up with barbecues, bouncy castles, and snow shovels. So, I don't see how people are going to overthrow a government with those types of things as their means of taking control. It was a narrative that they were trying to paint. They were trying to paint a January 6th, and all of the legacy media were all in line spouting the narrative that they've been dictated to give. Thank God we had the independent media that was there and telling the truth and telling the real story. Because if we hadn't had that, things would have been a whole lot different. And now, just to kind of digress slightly with Bill C-63, they know what happened with the trucker convoy and getting the information out. Now they want to take control. So that type of information, unless you're an approved, accredited type of journalist type of outlet, you're going to get shut down. So thank God we had that.
That's a very, very scary scary issue, Bill C-63. I'm watching that very closely. And it seems to me that they even have written into the bill even thinking about saying something hateful could get you in steep trouble with the law. And you could have an anonymous person make a complaint against you to, I guess, this new Digital Safety Commission, and they could put an ankle bracelet on you and confine you, or they could. Human Rights Tribunal could fine you $20,000, another $50,000 to the state for a total of $70,000. That's gonna really chill speech now. And I think you're right. I can see the connection between Freedom Convoy 2022 and these draconian speech laws that are coming out to kind of take away that independent and private media that is in competition with the mainstream media. It seems, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we showed the world, the trucker convoy and the people that came there to support them. We showed the world that you can get your voice heard and be peaceful and show no violence. Like we demonstrated how to get it done. People looked to Canada, and it inspired many countries across the world. So the government absolutely hates the thought that people that are peaceful can change the world. They need to shut that down. So that's what they're trying to do, but we can't let them. What we have to do as Canadians is say no, and say it really loudly. Say no. You're not going to do this.
And say it peacefully, and well, make it a celebration. And I mean, you really tied their hands behind their back, because if they're trying to poke and prod and generate a fight, you just absolutely frustrated them, because it just didn't happen. I wonder, how would you express the police involvement in all this as we went through the Freedom Convoy 2022? What was that police involvement progression like?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, the Ottawa Police Service were terrific. They were very friendly, very engaging. They loved the fact that people were there. It was a party sort of atmosphere. It was like a Canada Day celebration. They were taking selfies with people, shaking hands. They were terrific. And Chief Slowly took a lot of heat for that. So what they do, they got rid of him, and then they started bringing in police that they conditioned through, with the narrative that they were trying to shape from across the country to change the direction of how the protest was going to go. Because, like I say, in the beginning, the Ottawa Police Service, they were very, very good, very engaging. But over the 3 weeks, you saw the hostilities starting to evolve, and you could see them shaping an outcome. And, we all know what took place from that point on.
Yeah, I think slowly he sure got lambasted, and I guess his reputation and his career was absolutely destroyed by how they treated him. But I think he had a point. He was right when up front he said, this is not a police problem. This is a political problem. He said this needs a political solution, which of course would have entailed two sides to get together and have a chat about what the grievances are and maybe how they could be addressed. In your mind, did you ever see any kind of an outreach to discuss the issues that the truckers brought forward, the issues of vaccine mandates?
There was no engagement from the government in any way. That's all they wanted, was to hear their grievances and try to find some common ground and get some answers. And they would not engage. There was no dialogue. And, it didn't have to be the prime minister. It could have been a representative. It could have been anybody. I mean, wouldn't, like when you're dealing with a situation in any like business or you're going to have a mediator. You want to find out, what are you people sort of having as an issue? Let's see if we can resolve this. But they didn't do that. They went from the beginning right to the nuclear option, basically. And that is a testament to a tyrannical government.
Yes, it really did seem like they were kind of poking and prodding, and I might have the wrong viewpoint here, but but from what I saw, it looked to me like they purposely wanted to invoke that Emergencies Act. They were of a set mind to make it happen, and I think it seemed to me that they were trying to prod you into violence, which would have made that invocation much easier. That never happened because you guys just continued with the bouncy castles, and but they invoked it anyway, even though things were dismantling at Coots. The Windsor border was clear. I think it looked like things were were being solved. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, really, they talked about it even before the trucker convoy arrived in Ottawa. They wanted to invoke the Emergency Act. They wanted to paint everybody as terrorists. They had an agenda, and
Yeah,
all of the other issues across the country were over before they invoked the Emergency Act. And if you've been following what's happened at Coots with
yeah,
the four guys that were in prison
yeah.
um, in remand. Um,
Hmm.
they were painting a narrative. Those guys were political prisoners, and what they were telling through the media isn't the truth at all. They really tried to shape a narrative and use them as political prisoners so that they'd have justification to invoke the emergency order. And
Yeah,
that's exactly what they did. And that's why we're holding them to account for it. And that's why we did it.
yeah.
And
Now,
um,
now the Coots affair. I guess two of the four have pleaded out. Initially, the charge was attempted murder of an RCMP officer or officers. It was pretty. That's a pretty hefty allegation, but two were allowed to plead out on the basis of I think some improperly stored ammunition or arms or something like that. So that's a big jump from going from attempted murder of an RCMP officer to improper storage of a firearm, and that tells
okay,
me that looks like these charges were bloated from day one. Now we still have two guys I think are still in remand. I think,
yes. And to
but
when you saw the table layout with all the weapons that they had, this
yeah,
big cache of weapons, they really tried to paint a narrative that these were a bunch of terrorists, and it was nothing of the kind. But they had an agenda, and I'm sure they got their orders from the Biden administration. Get this resolved, get something done, do whatever you got to do. I don't think Trudeau was the mastermind. I think Freeland really is his handler, and that she was taking orders from outside of the country in many directions. So
well,
I think they had to do something to show their handlers that they're in charge, and that's what they tried to do. But it actually has not worked out for them very well at all.
no, it's embarrassing. I mean, they're embarrassing the nation around the world with. How do you keep guys in jail for over 700 days with no bail? I mean, that's a political prisoner if there ever was a political prisoner. But I appreciate your segue into Freeland because now I'd like to talk about your experience with uh, the impact that the freezing of bank accounts had on you and your family. How did that go?
Yeah, I'm one of I think it was 280 Canadians that had their bank accounts frozen. You know, I didn't drive a truck to Ottawa. I committed no crime. I wasn't convicted of any crime, but they found it necessary to freeze everything that I own. And you know, I had great difficulty trying to get home. Most of us use debit cards and don't carry a lot of cash.
Yeah,
So when I tried to, use my bank account, I realized, uh-oh, my bank account's frozen. So, thankfully there were some kind people that gave me some cash to get home. Otherwise, here I am in the middle of winter. I had no money for food. I had no money for gas. And I had to travel from Ottawa all the way out to the East Coast. And it was difficult. And then through Quebec, what happened was a lot of the gas stations wouldn't take cash because if you remember, we're still under lockdown. So
yeah.
I'm running on empty and trying to fill up, and they wouldn't take cash, and I couldn't get across one of the bridges where you needed to pay a toll. You couldn't pay cash; you had to pay debit or a credit card, and I had nothing. So I was getting lost. I didn't know my way around,
Why would they
and
take
it
cash?
was
Why would they take cash, Eddie? Was it because the money might be infected or something? Or
yeah, yeah.
oh,
That's
okay.
exactly right. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. Okay, so
It was traumatic.
so
And,
here
you
we
know,
have. So, sorry, Eddie. Here we have a uh, a military veteran with a stellar military career, not a blemish. As a matter of fact, he's one of the very few who has a Medal of Bravery, and his country turns around and basically freezes his bank accounts, turns him into a pauper, and sets him out on into the wilderness on his own with no support, no help. That's that's our government of Canada from where I stand, and that is, I find it just embarrassing, just absolutely embarrassing.
you know, for some of the people that may not be aware, I put a call out while I was in Ottawa. I called stand to, and you know, it's a military term that we use in the
Yep.
Army that it means you need to come and defend your position. Basically, you need to be here. So veterans came from across the country after that call. And, you know, we took the fences down around the National War Memorial, and they absolutely lost their mind over that. They said we were, you know, destroying the national. We put a guard on it for 24 hours a day, shoveled it, cleaned it, took absolute pristine care of it. Anyway, the veterans were there to show support to the people and to the truckers, and they acted as a shield between the police and the people, trying to diffuse the situation, saying, listen, guys, you don't have to do this. This is not how this has to go, when they brought in all the riot police. Anyway, a lot of the guys were severely beaten. They had their medals on, like what I have on today. A lot of them were combat veterans. In fact, most people may know the Chris Deering story. Chris Deering was a wounded Afghanistan veteran. He was a lone survivor of a roadside bomb, severely injured. He was one of the first guys they took to the ground, and three big guys put the boots to him. And he, prior to that, he said, if you're going to arrest me, I'll come peacefully. All I ask is you don't hurt me. I'm severely injured.
Yeah.
So they grabbed him first. So what they did is they took a lot of our guys and put them in a paddy wagon and drove them around for, I don't know, maybe an hour or so with no heat in the back, and drove erratically so the guys would bounce around in the back and bang into the walls.
Okay.
Then took them out to a processing center, made them stand in line for 2 hours in the freezing cold. It was minus 25, and then dropped them off outside the city in the middle of nowhere with no means to get back. That's what they did to our veterans as well as citizens that were there. It's absolutely disgusting.
That is pathetic, and I had no idea that kind of activity was taking place, especially the bouncing around in the back of a paddy wagon. That well, people can die. I mean, there was a case I think in Philadelphia where a prisoner was in the back of a paddy wagon, and they pulled that trick, and when they stopped to get him out, he was dead. I mean, that's that's a very, very dangerous ploy they're taking on.
It really is, you know, and just to show the disdain for people, the way they brought these police in, they were licking their chops at beating people up. They absolutely loved what they were doing. They were beating up grandmas and mothers and, you know, just average people that were offering no threat or violence and showing them nothing but, you know, love and care and happiness. They weren't there violently opposing them. They weren't trying to beat the police with sticks or brooms or throwing stones. They were doing none of that. And yet they came after and beat people senseless. You know, ran people over with the horses.
Yes. Yes.
It shot them with smoke grenades and rubber bullets and just nastiness.
Yeah.
I have lost complete trust in our police forces across the country. They should have stood up, and they didn't. And that trust is broken for probably the next few generations, and they're going to have to work real hard to get public support again. I don't trust them, and I do not want to engage with police in any way.
I can see your point, and I feel exactly the same way. And it seems to me like we have a situation here in Canada where all of our government agencies and services and security forces, everything seems to be politicized. They all pick up the political narrative of the day coming down to them from the government, and Well, you were an auxiliary officer with the OPP. Was it that way when you were doing your duties
No,
with the OPP? No. This has
no, I
happened all
found it to be, they were a very professional organization. I really enjoyed my time there. I mean, they were terrific. They were terrific police officers. And there's a lot of great police officers. But my problem that I have with the police across the country, all they had to do was say, no, we're not doing this. We're going to follow our oath and we're going to operate under the Constitution of this country and we're going to apply it accordingly.
Yeah.
We're not going to be the Gestapo for whatever regime is in power at that moment. And that's what they did. They became the, the enforcers of the state and didn't do their job.
And this extends, I think, beyond the police. I think we can see our judicial services, our courts, over the last 3 or so years with the pandemic, have gone out of the way to sideline and beat six charter freedoms and rights for individual Canadians, to give the government what they call, in one court case, a margin of appreciation. So whatever the government says, the courts are just parroting and totally failing to visit any kind of evidence that's brought before them that would support the individual charter rights of Canadians. Now, I think things went off the rails for the government because all these court cases, while they were ruling on whether or not our rights were infringed by pandemic measures, they didn't. Everything got thrown off and sideways when the actual Emergencies Act invocation itself was looked at by the courts to see if it infringed on rights, if it was unreasonable. Now, Judge Mosley, instead of looking at people coming forward with complaints about travel mandates or vaccine mandates, he was looking just at the invocation itself, and this allowed the charter to come into the argument, and he ruled that the charter was violated and the invocation of the Emergencies Act was not reasonable in the case of Section 8, which is search, seizure, due process, that type of thing, and Section 2B, which is individual rights to speak, or rights to congregate, those types of things. And that has now put the cat amongst the pigeons, because now I think this is the source of your legal suit, because with his ruling, it is now law that the government was unreasonable in its invocation, and you were a victim of that unreasonableness. So can you talk about your court case and how you see that panning out?
Sure. Actually, I don't know if you were aware that the court case for the Emergency Act and the freezing of bank accounts that Judge Mosley decided on, I was one of the plaintiffs on that case, along with a few others. So that was a massive victory. It took us 2 years to get that. We launched that lawsuit actually while the emergency order was still in effect. And it was a mad dash to get it done. We had to get it submitted to the court prior to the lifting of the emergency order in order to have standing. So we did that. And believe it or not, it was so close to the wire. I think we had 8 minutes before we would have lost our opportunity to launch that lawsuit.
This is like a James Bond movie where the bomb's going to go off in 10 seconds.
That's exactly what it was.
You got to defuse it. Okay. I didn't realize that at all, because now that you're talking about, if you would have delayed, if the order had been lifted, the Emergency Act had been lifted before you got your case in, they would have turned around and said, well, this is all moot, which they did in other cases. They said, well, this is all moot because they've lifted the travel mandates, or they've lifted this, or they've lifted. So you just got it in under the wire. That was very, very good work.
We were very lucky.
You must have great lawyers to see.
We have a fantastic team. We had the JCCF and others. We had Blair Ector and Bathsheba Vandenberg, who's also doing the Helen Bruce trial in Ottawa.
Yes.
They actually were the ones that got that done, and they're spectacular. They're out of Calgary. It flew under the radar. We did our actual trial last April, and it was on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And it was really you know, they're not stupid people, the attorney general and all the, you know, lawyers for the government. But, you know, me as a witness, the first question they asked me after, you know, court was brought into session, they were shaping a narrative the whole time. They said, "Is it not true that you're a white supremacist and a Nazi?"
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's the type of respect you get from the get-go in such a monumental case. So they were trying to paint the narrative all the way through the testimony. So
Okay.
anyway, not one mainstream media picked up the story about the court case. Really, it flew under the radar, and I'm glad it did. And I'll tell you why. Because I think it takes such a long time to get a decision in a case like that. If Canadians had, you know, heard about it and they were putting their hopes on winning a case like that, and let's say it didn't go our way, it would have been just another major blow to, you know, the spirit of Canada.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
to get that decision on the 24th of January, it was a couple of months late. It's supposed to be done within 6 months. Justice Mosley, you know, took his time, did a very diligent, well worded, well thought decision. I
Yeah.
was working in my garage and I got the call and I couldn't believe it. It was like I'd won the lottery. And from that moment on, my phone literally blew up. It
Okay.
went viral across the world. What had
Oh,
happened, that we had a successful decision. And the funny part about that is that what's the new justice minister, Varani? I can't think of his name right off.
Varani.
Varani.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Chrystia Freeland. Remember, this is a 191-page decision that Justice Mosley wrote. 14 minutes. Remember, everybody gets the paperwork at the same time. Nobody gets an advance copy. 14 minutes. They said they're going to appeal. They hadn't even read it. So it shows me they just are completely out of touch with reality.
Well, I think if they were smarts, they would admit some fallibility in all of this. They would come clean. They would say, "Okay, we made a mistake," but now they've locked themselves in, and they're in for the fight of their lives. Because, as you say, Mosley was made a very well reasoned decision. He says himself that up front he was going to side with the government because he thought they had the case, and he didn't think, you know, like I said before, he thought the government should have the margin of appreciation. He wasn't on your side. And then he went through the whole process and did the analysis. He did the analysis. He looked at the evidence, which no other judge did, and found out, yeah, there's some wrongdoing in this particular case. Yeah,
he really did. And one thing that people may not know, and I found this really interesting, is he admitted that early in his life he was a trucker himself.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and he released a decision on the same day that the trucker convoy started. So
okay.
I don't know what to read into that, but I think he was very methodical in what he'd done. And that decision, you know, I'm still trying to digest it. It's a massive document, you know, 191 pages. And he put a lot of expertise and knowledge into that decision because he knew that the government would challenge it. He knew it. So he tried to make it as bulletproof as he could. I don't think they've got a lot of wiggle room. I really don't.
No, they don't, because you know, all of the I mentioned before that the court previously had knocked down charter rights on the basis of margin of appreciation for the government and mootness in the case of the travel mandates that Peckford and Max Bernier took before the federal courts. And Mosley, in his decision, he addressed those issues up front and in detail. And he said, they do not apply in this case because this case is talking about the invocation of the Emergency Act. It's not talking about anything else, anything that these guys addressed before. This is unique and this is new. And he explained why those things didn't apply. So anybody that's going to fight and appeal this case has got a very, very big hill to climb. And I don't think they're going to be able to do it unless
I think so too.
Yeah, unless
and I'm so proud to be one of the plaintiffs that was on that case. A number of the plaintiffs, there was a few of us, they weren't given standing, but myself and Vincent Gersey, a retired OPP officer, we were both given standing. We were the last two in the lawsuit, and I am very proud to have been a part of that. And
That's right.
you know,
Because
that'll be an historic decision that will be talked about for generations, I think.
yes, yes, this will be talked about 100 years from now. Oh, for sure, for sure. And like you say, this is right up there with the Medal of Bravery. This is a crowning achievement. This is
It's,
great.
it's the funniest thing. I look at it this way: through a sequence of historical accidents, I ended up here. It's just you never go out looking to be that or do this. I, for whatever reason, have been, put in the position that I am, and I'm very careful and very mindful that it's not about me. This is about all Canadians. I'm really only a representative of what all Canadians went through, and I'm very proud that I was put in a position that I could stand up for Canadians and stand up for our rights. And it's not about me; it's about all of us.
I'd say that's some people might say that's very providential, Eddie. You're in that position, found yourself to be there, and then stood up I always like to say one of my favorite mottos is show up, don't quit, and that's exactly what you did, and it wasn't easy. It had to be awful difficult. Now I want to show you one thing. I was going to spend some time talking about the actual decision. Let me share screen here. Okay, here's your decision. Now, if I go down to, or sorry, this is your court. This is your case against in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice against the government, and you name a whole hockey sock full of people here. You're right up the top there with Justin Trudeau, and you're talking about Freeland, and you're talking about police officers. You're talking about the National Security Advisor. You're talking about the banks, and you're talking about certain so-called anti-hate groups. And then if I go down to page 17 and I look at this, and it talks about causes of action. And in your causes of action, you actually talk about negligence on the part of the government and its agents. You talk about misfeasance of public office. You go on to talk about abuse of process. I can see there's a lot to talk about there. Interference with economic relations, including a breach of contract, your bank accounts being frozen, breach of charter rights. Yeah, I'd say on a couple of counts at least. Trespass to chattels and conversion, injurious falsehood and defamation. Yeah, you're the guy. You're the white supremacist. You're the Nazi guy. Yeah. Okay, and there's all that anti-hate stuff in there. Intrusion and seclusion, assault and battery. That's where we have Afghanistan war veterans injured, wounded, being beat up by the police. Métis grandmothers being trampled by horses. Harassment and intimidation. Wow. And this one here, I want to spend a little bit of time on this, just a little bit of time on civil conspiracy. You are alleging that all of this stuff just didn't happen by accident. You're saying that there was a group of players who worked together to make all of this happen. The Emergencies Act. Could you frame your thoughts on this conspiracy and how
Sure.
it operated, how it did it?
Yeah, I can't go into too much detail, but
No, I don't think so. No.
They really did. They tried to shape a narrative, and at all costs, they went out of their way to make sure that all of their parties involved were on the same page. When you start seeing the information that we've been able to access, you realize that it was a conspiracy to get this result. When this case actually goes to court and we subpoena the documents and information that will come out, I suspect, this is only my opinion, is that we'll uncover criminality as well. That's not what we're alleging in this case, but that could be one of the results of having this unredacted information that we're going to be able to access for this court case. Now, this court case, you can see all the people and the entities that we've named. And what people really aren't aware of is that we've named them personally.
Yes.
And this is probably the most unique court case. There's many court cases or lawsuits, I should say, that have been launched, but each one has a slightly different flavor of what they're actually going after. Ours really covers the spectrum of everybody that was involved. And I think it's really important for Canadians to know that we're not out to have our government pay for the legal funding for them to defend themselves. So by going after them civilly, we want them to have to be able to defend themselves from their own pockets. And whether that happens or not remains to be seen, but that's our objective. And that's why we did it this way, because we don't want Canadians to be on the hook. Now, one of the comments that we get, well, you're suing for over $30 million for 20 people. I can tell you there's 280 people that had their bank accounts frozen. These 20 people were vetted. We're not in it for the money. This is not about us receiving this big payout at the end. This is going to cost us $2 million to pursue this. Yep. What Canadians have to know is that, sure, we might get a payout, we might not. We might just get a victory and no money. But Canadians have to stand up regardless of what side of the spectrum you're on, whether you think, freezing the bank accounts is a great idea or not. Think about this. Whatever government's in power at any particular time, you think you're on the winning side right now, and that us, they called us the free dum-dums and all the names that they threw at us. And they think that this is just great that we had our bank accounts frozen. Well, if the political landscape changes and the narrative shifts the other way, you could be on the other side of the coin and find you having your bank accounts locked down in the same manner we did. So I would really suggest to all Canadians, you need to get behind this lawsuit because it affects each and every one of us. It's not about us getting a payout at the end. That's not our job. That's not our goal. But you see, the problem in Canada now is that the punishment is the lawfare. That's just the way it is. They punish you through the process, and you've seen it in many court cases. They put you through and bankrupt you, and then drop the charges right at the end, and people walk away broke, and they had their charges dropped. So I see a lot of comments online, and people are saying, oh, yeah, nothing will happen. They're just in it for the money. They want to get rich. Really? I could think of better ways of getting rich than to go after the government and spend $2 million on a case that, is, given the political landscape, a very difficult case to pursue. So I'm hoping Canadians will support us. And I mean, financially support us as well, because it costs a lot of money. And if you don't mind, could I mention the organization that's helping us?
Yeah, I'm going to. I wanted you to say, what can we do to help? Where do we go? How do we make this happen?
Okay, it's in its early stages, but there's an organization called TAPCAN, and that's the Accountability Project Canada. So the Accountability Project, and the website is tapcan, tapcan.org. And there's different ways that you can contribute, through GiveSendGo or e-transfer. And this entity is helping us raise funds to pay for the lawsuit. So what's really different about this one in comparison to the way some of the other lawsuits have gone is that all of the participants, should we get a judgment, 10% of the judgment will stay with TAP. We are suing for, legal fees as well. So the legal fees will come back. What's unique about this is everybody that contributes to help us win this lawsuit, and I believe we will win. When we're successful, you're going to have a few choices. You can get your donation back, providing, we get the judgment. You can leave that donation with TAP, or you can have your donation donated to a charity of your choice. So TAP will live on beyond our lawsuit, and it'll help fund the legal challenges that other people are going to experience with this overreaching tyrannical government. So our goal is to reach $2 million. We've got $1 million showing up on the site. We're a long way from it. I mean, if we had 100,000 people in Canada donate $20, we'd be there. And there's enough people in the freedom movement that I'm sure $20 wouldn't break the bank for everybody. And I don't want to sound like a beggar, but like I would rather be doing something else, you know, sitting on my porch as a senior citizen and, you know, telling kids to get off the front lawn than taking on the complete government on my own and bankrupting myself. You know, I just hope Canadians would decide that, you know, they'd like to help us out. And we have like we even have people in our court case that didn't even support the trucker convoy that had their bank accounts frozen. They thought it was a horrible idea. They wanted nothing to do with the trucker convoy. They hated it, but they had their accounts frozen. So,
oh my God. Okay.
It can happen to anyone. We can't let the government get away with this. I mean, look how outraged the world was. It was, the world is still in shock. Businesses aren't investing in Canada. They're not coming here because of what happened.
No, people can't make the assumption anymore that their government can be trusted, and they'll never purposely do harm to Canadians. Not after what happened with you folks, with Freedom Convoy 2022, the freezing of bank accounts. Quite frankly, it looks like it's all just a prelude to centralized digital banking dollars that they can turn off and on at their will. It seems to me like where they're going. You can bet that we're going to be pushing this and supporting you and the organization at TAPCAN, Eddie. There's no two ways about it. This is an extremely important fight, and it's one that Canadians can't afford to lose. But
thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I just want people to know I'm not in it for the money, and none of the people are. And I know everybody's hurting financially right now. I get it. I know. But we're going to lose our country. We're going to lose it unless we stand up and hold these people to account. We have two ways to fight with these people. One is the ballot box and the other is the courts. We don't have the ballot box right now. We only have the courts. So we have to do this. This is something you need to do. They can't get away with this. They've been getting away with everything.
No, and they're taking us down a very, very dark path. So with that, Eddie, any last minute announcements or anything you'd like to do? Or now the court case.
Yeah.
Last question. What's the next? What happens next with the court case? What's going to be the next step?
Well, all of our documents have been submitted, and it's just a matter of getting the actual court date, and that should follow in the next 6 or 8 months or so, hopefully. I would expect that we're going to see an expedited, there's two scenarios. It'll either be done before the next election, or they're going to softball it to the next government should they lose. So my suspicion is they'll softball it to the next government. So, let them deal with it and they can walk away. But I just want to, if you don't mind, I'd like to just say to everybody that's watching and everybody in Canada that we're going to get this. We're not going to let them destroy our country. Don't think that it's hopeless. It's not. One person can make a difference, and one person can inspire another person. And we're going to get our country back and hold these people accountable. So don't give up. Don't think there's nothing you can do. Speak up and say no.
Yeah, like I say, show up and don't quit. And with that, I guess I'll thank you very much, Eddie, from the bottom of my heart. This has been a fantastic discussion. I really enjoyed it. And I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed talking to you today. Thanks again.